PaRappa the Rapper is one of the most iconic PS1 games. Its sequel, PaRappa 2, and the spin-off, Jammer Lammy, are just as top tier, but I've only played small bits of them for whatever reason. OG PaRappa took huge chances, and it's considered to be one of the first real rhythm games ever made, hitting Japan in 1996 and the US in 97. It actually came out on the same day as my childhood favorite, Crash Bandicoot, in Japan. Games like Scratch and Melody, which hasn't yet had a full release, has been influenced by PaRappa as recently as 2022.
Listen up now, we on this sound. Listen up now, we own this sound. Ain't never been wrong to let you down. Ain't never been wrong to let me down.
And that's not even including all the games that try to be as stylish and silly. If your game gets to the point where you've got a popular sound on TikTok being over 20 years old, then I'm pretty sure you're a legend.
When I say boom, 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 you say bam, bam, bam. No pause in between. Come on, let's jam. Step on the gas.
Step on the gas.
Step on the brakes.
Step on the brakes.
Stage 1. Who made this crazy game? There is no doubt.
Masaya Matsura is the producer of PaRappa, and the one who started the dev studio, Nana on Shana. They haven't done much out of their wheelhouse since PaRappa. They've also slowed down in putting out new games in recent years, which is a waste. Matsura gets most of the credit for this game, and it's well deserved, but there's also the scenario writer, Gavin Ito, and the lyricist and main rapper, Ryo Watabe. We'll get into those two soon. One of the best interviews I've found from Matsura about PaRappa is from the Japanese magazine called The PlayStation. When asked how a rapping game even came about, he says,
I'd been making CD-ROM and music-related software for computers for a while, and in the course of that work, I got hands-on experience with a wide variety of musical genres. When I started experimenting with my own ideas for a music game, rap was the most interesting choice. I also tried out guitar, synth, vocal music, and various others, but rap best matched the direction I wanted to go in for a music game.
He also states that,
The thing with rap is, no matter where a piece goes musically, the rapping element can ride on top of that freely, unrestricted. It's a genre with a high degree of interactivity. Perhaps another reason for my attraction to rap, and a very big one, is that I can't rap in English at all. I guess I had a kind of subtle mental complex about it, which made it all the more fascinating to me.
the next interview I'm about to pull from is translated from the strategy guide for the PS1 game. So here's some background on Watabe. Before he got serious in his rap career, he worked in the US as a salaryman, picking up the language quickly. While he was earning a good amount of money, he became unsatisfied with that lifestyle. So would I. The interviewer asked how he actually got into PaRappa eventually, and Watabe said,
A friend of mine was working on his debut CD, and he invited me to help with the recording sessions. About 2 to 3 weeks after that, I got a call from him again saying, Hey, I know someone who's working on a video game and needs some help. After that, he introduced me to Matsura, which was the first meeting with him. Unlike today, at that time, the PlayStation wasn't popular at all. It was the golden age of Super Famicom, I think. So when I first heard about this game, I thought it was going to be a commercial dud. But it was about rap, and that sounded cool to me. The thing is, though hip-hop is all about freedom and originality, and I was worried that these qualities would be lost if I tried to translate hip-hop into a video game.
Pre-1996, there wasn't really a scene for rhythm games, let alone rap games. Dance Aerobics came out in 1987 on the Nintendo, with the dance pad and all. And this is the first game to have a beat you needed to be in time with to win. Pretty inventive for sure. After this, Konami made Beat Mania for the arcades, where you played with a turntable and remixed genres from hip-hop to techno. There are modern versions of this game even spotted in places like Round 1, which is unfortunately one of the few mainstream arcades left in the US. Beat Mania spun off into the Japan-only Guitar Freaks, and a couple other things, but this influence mostly died off with Rock Band and Guitar Hero. It wasn't even until '98 when DDR hit the scene in a post-PaRappa world.
So about these backend stages, how did they come about?
In the strategy guide interview with Watabe, the interviewer mentioned, during the rough draft of the movies, you provided all the temporary voice recordings for every character. The interviewer also said, For the movies, I understand that you took the Japanese dialogue and lyrics that were created during the scenario meetings, and then on the spot, you would convert that to English and perform it. Then Matsura would take recordings of your performances there on his notebook and sync them up to the movie visuals. I also heard that most of your rough takes there actually made it onto the final version of the game as is.
In English lyrics, no matter what song, there always has to be rhyming. It's even in things like the alphabet. Think about it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Even the American national anthem rhymes. It's the rhyming that makes the lyrics singable, allows you to get into the groove and the rhythm. But in Japanese, there is no rhyming, and you don't get the same rhythmic groove. Imagine 4 stanzas of lyrics. It's pretty standard to have N rhythms on the first and third lines, and on the second and fourth. Another thing I tried early on was to make the words you repeat back easier to rhyme, so that there'd be a flow, like kick and stick and chop and top. When I tried it, it sounded horrible. So it ended up that only Master Onion's own rapping rhythm.
I need to go, just as bad as you. What I had this morning, I don't even wanna say to you. Kick, punch, turn, and chop the door.
Kick, punch, turn, and chop door.
When it came to the actual scenarios, that's where Gavin Ito came in. He said,
The way it worked was like this. Each time I wrote the story for a stage, I'd bring it to the rappers, who would then plot out my basic story on a big piece of butcher paper. With that, they'd start drawing pictures and storyboarding the movie scene.
Matsura interjects with,
It was something midway between storyboarding and screenplay writing.
Exactly. Using that storyboard screenplay hybrid, we'd write out the dialogue and the general backstory notes in Japanese. Ryu, the rapper, would then start freestyling lyrics in English on the spot. Then Matsuda would break out his laptop and record them, and they'd work out the art there too. Those sessions were really where Ryu's performance came together.
Some of the scenes in PaRappa are downright absurd, and I love them for it. I mean, just take a look at what you're watching right now. They're literally arguing and rapping over who gets to go to the bathroom first.
The funky flow, but now I really got to go.
In the rain, when you
I presumed that the Japanese audience would understand the jokes or humor of PaRappa to a certain extent, but I had never thought this sense of humor would travel overseas.
It's safe to say the humor still sticks. It's halfway between a goofy and less mature South Park joke, and the more typical slapstick and physical style of humor common in Japan. Speaking of South Park, that and PaRappa look somewhat similar in their 2D approach to the character design.
This is it. This one's for the game. Purple. Kick the baby.
Everything but the character models in PaRappa are more 3D, while the characters have a flat paper look to them. Honestly, I can't for the life of me find what the models were created in, and that's driving me crazy. But I'm obsessed with the fact that this game leans into the realm of this is a video game, instead of pushing itself to be a pseudo-realistic game that looks so uncanny by 2000. And then everyone born after the release is like, no, I can't play that game, and it's tank controls, and it's ugly, and yeah, don't get me started. Play Resident Evil Nemesis, okay? Play Final Fantasy VII OG. Or bite me.
This game looks better than the funky flow.
The runtime here tends to only last around an hour, yet there's so much visual information to throw at your eyeballs within that time frame. As mentioned before, it tends to deliver jokes through visuals. The voice acting and singing cast are actually really advanced for the PS1, and they sound great with the PS1 sound chip. Thank goodness this wasn't on the 64 sound chip, specifically to the benefit of the voice quality, even if I do like certain aspects about that system. That Evangelion game is one of the best examples of what that thing can do. I've already expressed my liking of the look of the game, but let's check out the character designs and talk a bit about the personalities. So starting with the main dog himself, PaRappa was originally designed as this, and then became this. His pants are perfect for the hip-hop image he's trying to fit into, and I love the design of his shoes that remind me a bit of Nike Zooms. His orange hat with the frog on it is the standout feature, and I'll never forget that kid that I checked out at the game store I worked at, who was absolutely stunting on everybody with his PaRappa beanie. I remember commenting about how sick it was, and he was shook that anyone knew what PaRappa was except for him, because of course, baby teenager brain thinks no one knows anything they do. We still had a good laugh about it though. Then there's Sunny Funny, and by the way, did you know there's a full-on PaRappa anime? PaRappa only raps in it like 3 times though, and the characters are more fleshed out in that show, especially Sunny and PJ. Unfortunately in the game, Sunny's kind of whatever, even though she's the one PaRappa wants to shoot a shot for. I like the color scheme for her. The red, yellow, blue works as primaries, while the green and pink kind of offset the other colors to make her really stand out. I also just like that she embodies rainbows and sunshine, working nicely with her name. PJ Barry looks a bit like a Mucha Lucha character, but without the outlandish personality. He's the lazy-eyed bored character who's comically unreliable in a pinch. I don't have much to say about him except for the fact that I really like how he's stitched together with X's before he has a little belly button. Katie Cat is one of the cooler characters who has much more importance in Jammer Lemmy, being a bass player if I remember right. Katie's guitar looks a bit like a hollow-bodied Gresh, and I love how the color tones down the red of her clothing. Her platforms are sick too, and I think her overall look really carries that 70s funk styling the game hints at. Joe Chin is a dog too, and he represents all of PaRappa's insecurities. He's buff, a businessman, and he gets a sick limousine for everyday use. For whatever reason, he also wants Sunny Funny. Design-wise, he's maybe a Ren and Stimpy villain. I like the goofy chin, but other than that, he's not really anything special to me, and I think that's the point. Chop Chop is awesome, and yeah, he's fitting into a stereotype, but it works within this context. He's an onion, but he's got the color of a lime, which is confusing. He serves as a perfect tutorial, and I'm a big fan of how he's always the most supportive of the teachers when you catch up with him later. Instructor Mussolini is the hard-edged driving teacher, and she looks a bit like that principal from Matilda. The way her hair sticks out from under the hat is a nice touch, but I do think they could have put her in slightly different colored clothes. Though that's more of a nitpick than anything. Navy and brown work well together. Her song is definitely one of the most recognizable and a fan favorite for sure. Prince Flea Swallow is my favorite. He's got the funky flow. I like the scruff under his chin, and all the colors he wears really make his skin pop while still giving that relaxed stoner look. He's silly, and I'm about it. Cheep Cheep is the stupid chicken cook I can't stand. I don't like her snobby voice, and her level always triggers me for real. It takes me 5 tries every time because the timing is always a little off on the inputs for her stage. I do like the loose strings of her hair due to stress maybe, but other than that, she's just a chicken, and it works, I know, but I'll never get over her freaking stage. Pretty sure MC King Kong Mushi is a flea. He's top tier design though. The money signs, his buttons are hilarious and possibly a commentary on the music industry at the time. The striped hat also reminds me of a blimp, sort of like he's got an airhead, right? The little flower on his chest reads as both classy and delicate, while his pointy-toed Oxfords are somewhat gaudy. But honestly, all the characters are somewhat gaudy. They're all brightly saturated and really blown out. Apparently this game was heavily marketed towards children by the character designer, Rodney Greenblatt in the US. Even outside of PaRappa though, his art has the same look, which has a pop art sense of color while the actual rendering of the figures feels like a modern surrealist piece. See, PaRappa didn't sell as well in the US, but at least that didn't mark the death of the series. We still got the sequel and the spin-off after all.
But how do you play? Do you know?
This game is multi-layered in playstyle. 1, the teacher says a line and therefore shows you button prompts which you then have to repeat correctly. 2, just because the button prompt is there, sometimes you actually have to hit it or hold it later or earlier than what's shown. This is a game based on sound more than anything. If it flows, it flows. Otherwise you sound like an absolute hot mess. Once you play through the game, at least once on normal or higher, a 3rd layer is revealed. The cool rating. This has been somewhat elusive to me, but recently I've started to go back and play these levels more times for the trophy grind. Anyhow, you have to be at a good rating, and then in that right-hand corner, you'll see the word cool flash. And it's a very slippery slope to finally push it into cool. My best advice would be to play one line straight and perfectly in time, and on the next line, before each button prompt, you double tap. And then you do that on 2 lines. Once you're in the cool rating, your teacher will say something totally different than you've seen before. And then you have to keep playing the song without any prompts. The trick is to wait until you're in the 3rd or 4th stage of a given song so you can't mess up the rating. Because if you drop back to good, it kicks you out entirely and you don't get that elusive trophy, or the bragging rights to have finished with cool. Without the prompts, I find that just replaying lines of the song pattern with a little flair, like using L1, will keep the rhymes going.
It's on a lot of systems. Which one is the best?
So my experience with PaRappa was first on the PSP. At this point, I don't remember how I even heard about the game, but it had been one I wanted to try for a while by the time I picked it up in 2019. The box art is cool. I really like the manual art. But it literally kicked my butt so hard I gave up after like a full hour of trying to just play the first level. I still recommend it, but there does seem to be a pretty hefty delay between what you see and what you play. My Hannah Montana PSP just couldn't keep up with it. If you're like me and you have those composite cables that can connect your PSP to the TV, it's even worse, so that's definitely gotta be played handheld. Though there is a feature locked to the PSP, that's that there are 4 or 5 remixes of each song that you were able to download from the website through the PSP browser. I've never done it because my PSP struggles to connect to Wi-Fi, but here's one example of the remixes I got from Fizzy on YouTube.
I'm working in the flea market so early.
As for pricing, it's the second cheapest route. On eBay and Mercari, I tend to see it around the $25 mark, and I don't really see it going up anytime soon. So the PSP version is a slightly upgraded port of the PS1 version. It still looks good though. But even with my collecting tendencies, I've never felt the urge to spend a lot on the OG version. It goes for a pretty penny. In person, the lowest I've ever seen it is about $135 USD, and on eBay it's usually around $150 or above. The major downside of playing this version is the delay. If you're not playing on a CRT, it's a nightmare. If you do have a CRT though, it looks like a dream to play. Of course you can play it on a flat screen too, but it's seriously not something I'd recommend. Fortunately, I'm the kind of gamer who has a CRT, and that's how I'll play Jammer Lammy with my disc version, but it's generally not the version I'd recommend unless it's for collecting's sake. The cheapest version of the game is on the PS3 store. You'll be able to purchase it after the 4-hour load time. I'm kidding. The sequel and Jammer Lammy are on there too. And I sound like a broken record, but there is still lag. It's a perfect port of the PS1 game, and you are able to go into settings and smooth out the game if you want to, but because of the HDMI output, it leaves a bit to be desired. Whatever though, if this is how you need to play it, I don't blame you. It's only $10. Okay, so as for the footage you've been watching, I'm playing the PS4 remaster, and it's the version I recommend. It looks fantastic. It really makes everything come to life. In general, there's a lot of confusion between what a remake versus a remaster is, and this game doesn't necessarily help that discussion. This is honestly more of a remake due to how they've rendered out new models and backgrounds and just about everything else. On forums, I notice a lot of people cry about the lag, but it's honestly not noticeable to me. Like, yes, you do press slightly before the prompt, but in my experience, that's how all of the versions work except for the PS1 OG. The only downside is that cheap level really does kind of have a weird lag, and it's not like the rest of the game. Anyway, it's on the PSN store for only $14.99 USD, which I can totally get behind. Sadly, in North America, that digital version is all we got. But, not all hope is lost. There is a physical Asian copy that runs about $25 to $30. It is one of those things I'd say to pick up sooner than later, because I have noticed that in the last year or so, it's increased by a little bit. Always remember that the PS4 is region-free on games, but it's the DVDs and Blu-rays that can only be played 5 or so times. The system makes you change which region you're in when you try to use those. Probably copyright stuff, I'm not sure. But you shouldn't have a hard time with the PS4 remaster of PaRappa.
Toys, guitars, and more. It's a lot to digest.
Medicom is a company known for their really high-quality Japanese-related toys and merchandise. I love their Evangelion line. I have an awesome Wounded Rei Ayanami doll from them. It's beautiful. They made PaRappa figures that are sick, but there's a lot more out there based on PaRappa. Stickers and plush ahoy. Check out the guitars. If I could snag one, I would in a heartbeat. Their shapes are gorgeous, and I'm so curious to hear their tones. Here are the pics that go with it. Fire. I'm in love with this toaster, too. I'd cook so many Pop-Tarts in here. And this is the Lammy arcade machine. I wish I could come into contact with this thing. I lived by one of the best arcades in the US, Galloping Ghost, until recently. I'm honestly a little surprised they haven't picked this thing up. Maybe one day. I'm sure it's a monster to track down. As I've already expressed by now, PaRappa the Rapper really made a mark on the music game genre, and I really don't imagine something like Space Channel 5 or Guitar Man, two of the most awesome and artful rhythm games ever made, would have come out if something like PaRappa hadn't been there to set the stage. Do I recommend it? Of course. It's not a long game. If you're like me with a dreaded backlog, or you play the longest games ever, JRPGs, then this is a welcome palate cleanser. And hey, if you appreciate music at any level, I dare you to not find yourself randomly spitting rhymes at your pet.
I Gotta Believe was actually the first title I had intended to use for my own album, but I gave it to PaRappa instead. It comes from the motto of my old high school football team, which is actually, you gotta believe.
I gotta be deep, I gotta
do when they come?
I gotta believe.
What you gonna do when they
I gotta
come?
receive. I gotta receive. I gotta
do what? You gotta do what?
I gotta believe. I gotta believe. I gotta believe.
Yo, everybody, just check out the way I live, everybody.
Yo, everybody. Yo,